Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Galen and this is Canadian Whiteboard Finance, where I take complex financial concepts and make them simple using a whiteboard. So today I'm going to talk about how financial advisors get paid. And I was in the park the other day, kids were hanging out with other kids from school, talking to one of the parents, and she was like, the parent was asking me, he's like, Galen, how do you get paid anyway? Are you salaried? Are you commissioned? Like, how does it all work? And I realized that before I became an advisor, my wife and I met with an advisor, and we're sitting in a room, and was giving us advice and asking us questions. We met with him several times, and he never asked us to, write a check, like as if we, if you go to the lawyer and we got a will, they said this is how much you're going to pay for that. Whereas the advisor, I'm sure at some point he told us how he got paid, but we were we just didn't remember or we didn't know. So something that's good to have clear. Now, another thing I'm going to cover is there's a lot out there in financial, blogs and whatever about how people prefer one way over another. I will talk about the pros and the cons of the different ways. I'll talk about the main three ways that advisors get paid, and go into that, and then also a couple red flags of how if an advisor gets paid in such a way, just to keep an eye out for a certain thing. Now, first thing I'll say is it doesn't so much matter how they all get paid or we all get paid. It does matter how the one that you use gets paid, because if you want to know, you should ask. Some of my clients don't care. Some of them want to know, but it matters more how the one you're working with gets paid than in general. So certainly feel free to ask your advisor how they get paid. Why not? All right, let's hop on over to the whiteboard. So I'm not going to go into tons of detail on like percentages and things like that advisors get paid, because that's a lot of information, but really sort of like the top three ways that they get paid. So one is salary. So an advisor getting paid the same by the company they work for. Typically, in that situation, it's a salary plus a sort of a bonus or a recognition for doing different things. It's not usually just a straight up salary. It's usually salary plus bonus. Number two is commission, where they get a percentage of what you're buying. That's how they get paid. And number three is pay as you go, I'm going to call it. It's basically like you pay for the plan. I guess I'll call that pay for plan, where you can either pay an advisor by the hour or by the plan. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how each of these work. So salary plus bonus, I mean, fairly straightforward in the sense of the advisor gets paid a flat salary for the company that they represent. Oftentimes that group is given bonuses by opening, or some sort of recognition for opening new types of accounts for the individual. They're rewarded for that sort of a thing. So it's not typically just the salary. There's usually other bonuses involved. Number two, commission. So it's a little bit more complex in the sense that they either get paid one of two ways usually. One is upfront for something. Insurance tends to have an upfront sale, so if you plunk down a certain amount of money on an insurance product, then a portion of that is going to go out to the advisor. And a lot of times there's a clause where if it gets canceled in the first couple years, then the advisor has to go and pay it back. And then the other thing besides the upfront is what's called a trailing commission in the commission world. It's sort of like a retainer, is the way I think of it, is that if you're putting money in on a regular basis, or if they are managing, an investment account for you, a percentage of the amount that's invested with them ends up coming out as a commission as well. So those are kind of the two ways: upfront or a retainer for ongoing. And the idea behind that is that the advisor stays in touch with you. The advisor does a level of continuity of work with you. Now, the pay for the plan, as I was saying, there's really two ways. One is you say, I'm going to plunk down a certain amount of money, and you're going to create a plan. For most people, it's a retirement plan, but it could be an estate plan. And you're going to give me this plan, and I'm going to implement it. So here's the client. I'm going to implement it wherever I want, however I want. The other option is pay by the hour. So, it's going to be a clock. Say an hour of your time. I'm going to give you a certain amount of money for an hour of your time to give me advice, and that's the end of the transaction, so to speak. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail of other ways that advisors get paid that is also, really important. Now, and I'm going to talk about why I'm doing this. So if I were looking for an advisor, and certainly check out my video where I talk about the top questions I would ask an advisor. If I were talking to an advisor, I would ask them, are you rewarded in any way for me going into more debt or debt? Are you rewarded for debt? And by this I mean, And I would straight up ask this. If I was working with an advisor, I'd say, are you rewarded if I get a credit card? Are you rewarded if I get a line of credit? Are you rewarded if I get a mortgage? And now here's the thing about getting paid. And I'm not going to go into this on this one, but there is this idea out there that, people say in the blogs and things like that, and they say like, there's a perceived conflict of interest when someone is paid to do something or someone is paid more to do something than another thing. And my take on that is people are either going to work in a way that's ethical or they're not. The way that they're compensated, as a matter of fact, shouldn't influence that. And so when I started as an advisor, like I said, I'm not going into percentages and everything, but man alive, and I'm a numbers guy, looking at all the different ways I was getting paid, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to look at this. I'm just going to help people. I'm going to meet a ton of people, and I'm just going to see how it goes. And that was my philosophy for the first long while. It wasn't actually until I became a person who hired and trained other advisors that when they asked me how they got paid, I was like, well, I guess I better learn exactly how you get paid. So that's what it took for me to actually learn, more of the ins and outs. So that's what I would ask is I would say, are you rewarded for me to take on debt or to take on more debt? Because someone should know that. Because a lot of Canadians have a lot of debt and they don't necessarily need to take on more, so they should just know that. I mean, maybe someone does need a line of credit, sometimes people need them, but it's good to know if the person's getting rewarded for that. The next question I would ask them is, are you rewarded for me leaving my money alone? And by that I mean just leaving my money invested and not changing investments. What I mean is, let's say the markets are going up and down, up and down, down, down. So studies and history have shown that for most people, if they're in a good portfolio to begin with, when there's a crash, they shouldn't change. They should ride it out. And I do not know your specific situation, so I'm not giving advice here, but that typically is what works. And typically the people who try to jump ship and go to something else actually end up losing. And I can do a whole nother video on, how the average investor underperforms the investment they're in because the average investor tends to panic and jump out and jump back in. The question then for any advisor I would have is, are you rewarded for leaving my money alone? If I put my money into a portfolio and I just leave it there, and historically, statistically speaking, that's usually the best thing to do, will you be paid for it? Will you be rewarded for it? So the next thing I would ask is, what am I getting for what I'm paying? So if there is a fee going on, I would say, okay, I'm putting away this much, or this much of what I'm putting away is going to a commission or a salary or, whatever's going on. What am I getting for my advice? And I would say at a bare minimum, everyone should be getting a written plan for their advice. And if there are any investments involved, I would definitely recommend getting an investment policy statement, which is a roadmap of how the money is going to be invested. And then it's also a game plan of what we're going to do when the markets are up, what we're going to do when the markets are down, created at the time of investing. I'd definitely say that. And the next thing would be a projection, like a written projection of, yes, there's some assumptions in play. What are you likely going to see for if it's retirement that you're looking at, or saving for a savings goal, or a estate plan? That should be written down, and there should be a projection of what that's going to look like. And the last thing I would say, especially for more complex cases, is some level of tax planning. A lot of my clients require a level of tax planning. I talk to their accountant, their lawyer, to make sure everything's going right. So I would say that, bare minimum, written plan. Everyone should have a written plan. If there's investment involved, everyone should have an investment policy statement, which is not just a statement showing what's invested. It's what's invested, how it's invested, what the final goal is, and a game plan of what you're going to do when the markets are up or they are down. And then a projection of either retirement or savings or the estate plan, whatever the goal is, education. There should be something written down. So that's the main way that advisors get paid. Like I said, the most important thing is to know how the one you're working with is getting paid. As I mentioned, what really matters is how the person you're working with gets paid, that you should be asking the questions. And at the end of the day, there's a lot out there that's saying, oh, if people get paid a certain way, it's better. If people get paid another way, it's better. What I believe in is that if the value that you're getting is matching what you're paying or is greater than what you're paying, then it's probably working for you. And I don't believe that getting paid a certain way makes someone unethical. Yes, there's a lot out there about a perceived conflict of interest, but I believe people are either going to behave ethically or they're not. And I mean, a couple years ago, I had appendicitis, went to the hospital. The surgeon looked at me and she said, Galen, a lot of people recover from this with antibiotics. So she said, you can either get it out and it was the beginning of the summer, and I was going to miss all my triathlon season that year, and I was kind of bummed because I'd trained for months for triathlons that year, or I could take antibiotics, and if the antibiotics worked, she said just leave it in there. I ended up taking the antibiotics, and it worked, and I asked my dad, who's a doctor, what he thought, and he said, well, if the surgeon, who would probably get paid more for you to do the surgery than take the antibiotics, is telling you to take the antibiotics, then you should probably just take the antibiotics. So, you know, surgeons, doctors, plumbers, carpenters, mechanics, I mean, the list goes on of people who potentially could do something in a way where they get paid more or they charge more. And my belief is that if any sort of person in that position is ethical, they're simply going to act in a way that's ethical. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So that's the top main 3 ways that people get paid. Find out the way that your person's getting paid. You know, like I said, some of my clients, they definitely want to know, definitely top of mind. Absolutely, I spell it out for them. Other people are not as interested. I think it's important that they have a sense of it, though, because I've definitely seen people all of a sudden get worried about a plan because they perceive that they're just paying too much. So it's really good to spell it out. So thanks for joining me. And before you go, if you haven't subscribed yet, so I'm going to look where the button should be. It should be right there. Subscribe. And the other video that's kind of in line with this one, that's definitely in line with this one, is top questions to ask an advisor. So in addition to understanding how an advisor gets paid, I do recommend you go out and you ask the questions that I put in this video, if you haven't watched it already, to ask your advisor. If you already watched that one, just check out any other video I have. I'm trying to point to the right place here. Anyways, till next time, see ya.